Hi, and welcome back to Health and Wealth. I'm Ana Ramos, and I'm so glad that you're here. We often speak about time as something we manage. We schedule it, we spend it, we try to save it. But what if time is not simply something we manage? What if it is something we communicate? Perhaps it's through our pace, through our response times, through even interruptions, through urgency. Well, today's conversation invites us to look at time differently, not as a productivity tool, but as a relational force. I'm joined by Dr. Dawna Ballard, Associate Professor of Organizational Communication and Technology, and an expert in chronemics, the study of time as it is bound to human communication. Her research explores what drives our pace of life and how that pace shapes the way we relate, we work, we even sustain vitality over time. In her upcoming book, Time by Design, How Communicating Slow Actually Allows Us to Go Fast, she introduces the idea of chronemic design, the process through which we actively shape time itself, rather than simply reacting to it. In this conversation, we explore how speed is not just a personal habit, but something we co-created in interaction, how urgency becomes normalized, and how the tempo of our communication quietly shapes the depth of our relationships. Because perhaps the question is not only how we use time, but how time is using us. So take a breath, settle in, and let's begin. Dawna, thank you so much for joining us. It's such a pleasure to have you here. I know that when we first connected, I think that we just went on to talk and talk and talk because it's such an interesting topic, which, by the way, I never even knew the name. But first and foremost, welcome. Welcome to Health and Wealth.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to continue our conversation.
Yes, but we'll have to take a little step back so that we can let our listeners know a little bit more about what we talked. And,
Great.
one of the things that we talked about, and I said, say that one more time for me, how you say it, and is the concept of chronemics or chronemics. I hope, correct me if I'm right or if
The
I'm wrong.
chronemics.
Beautiful. I mean, I've never heard of it. I've been in microeconomics and macroeconomics, but what is chronemics? Let's get started. What is that?
Yeah, so chronemics is the study of time as it's bound to human communication. So to relationships, to our conversations, to everything that connects people with others. And so because you can look at time like cognition, there's a whole thing, right, that allows us to know the passage of time. Or you could look at just sociology, you could look at it in a variety of settings. But when we're talking about chronemics, we're talking about the ways that we create time together, that it's a mutual co-construction and what that looks like and how that shapes us and how that shapes how we then interact. It's cyclical. We shape it, then it shapes us continually over time.
So is time a form of communication?
Time is a form of communication, but it's just important to recognize that time is the result of communication.
Okay, talk more.
Well,
What does that mean? Talk more.
so our experience, like culturally, for example, across cultures, people see time differently, and it's because of the relational dimension or the task dimension we associate with time. So in some cultures, time is simply a clock and time is just about tasks. But then in other settings or with other people or in other cultures, time is an event and it's always unfolding and it's about the event. It's less about the clock. So when we think about time as an event, that means it's also about relationships. So in one, it has context and it's a backdrop that allows us, it's essentially, this is the thing that allows us to be together, to connect, to enjoy each other, to build a relationship. And in others, it's the backdrop that is just about tasks, and the relationship and the communication kind of is getting in the way of what time's for. The idea that time is money, right? That Benjamin Franklin said in a advice to a young tradesman. So he said, so talking about finance, he was like, remember that time is money. And so there's the idea that even though he said a lot more, so that was taken a bit out of context, but there was this idea that time is this thing that we utilize in order to simply accomplish things. And that's also how industrial capitalism allows us to conceive. The only way it allows us to conceive of time is literally we're trading our time for a wage. And this is new. Your listeners should understand that never before in human history, and the Industrial Revolution only began a few hundred years ago. So this isn't a long time for all of human history. That before that, there was never any conception that you could trade your time for a wage. You traded your time for talent, for a product, like you, right? So a skilled craftsman would build a table and then would sell the table for what the table offered. It was never the time it took to build that table. So we really had never seen time as a commodity before the Industrial Revolution, but we now do often see it that way. So we think of time as communicating because of the way we conceive of it.
I think it's mind blowing, right? The fact that we're starting to shift into that. And since you talked a little bit about the Industrial Revolution, so we're talking about a little bit developed markets and undeveloped markets and how we're seeing the shift, right? And that goes into a whole new world of investments and things like that. But we're not here to talk about investments today. What I want to talk about is, and actually there's this preconceived notion, because I've been fortunate enough to be able to live around the world, travel around the world, work around the world. And I've also seen the different cultures, how they relate to certain things, right? And so tell us a little bit more, because there is that concept or that concept or that perception that, oh, you Americans, right? This is how it begins. You Americans only want to work and make money, right? And that is obviously not the perception or the way other cultures live, even here in Mexico City, and you see it in Europe. But one of the things that I'm starting to see is that as these other worlds, right, are becoming more industrialized, right, they're developing more, you're beginning to see that a lot more. And that has its own repercussions, right, from health, your health, your finances, your relationships. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, let's take that one example about the change you're describing. So the siesta in Spain used to be, that was acknowledged and followed as a practice nationally. And in I believe it was just the 90s, we can fact check this. It wasn't that long ago, late 90s or early 2000s, they got rid of that as a national policy. And so, yes, there are still places where they have siestas, but let's look at what a siesta is. A siesta is literally following the body's clock. And let's also have the context. We didn't have reliable mechanized clocks until the 20th century, right? It was in the 1900s that we actually could all say, oh, this is the time. Before that, there wasn't a reliable way to do that. Times were always different in different cities and we didn't have this. So so we followed events, and one of the events is our body's time. So the reason that we have siestas is because every human's body, from around in the afternoon, around 2:00, is tired. We go through a down phase and it's often after we've eaten. So this just we think that it's from the food, but it's actually not. Whether you eat at that time or not, your body goes into a lull. And so we were respecting, okay, we'll get up, we'll do the things, we'll have lunch and have a siesta. Then we'll come back to work. And in those cultures, they work much later into the evening, actually. And so that's a good example of around the world how different cultures have changed to adopt and adapt to this global sort of time scarcity that really was driven by the West and by Industrial Revolution.
So how does that shift, right, that has happened? And by the way, thank you so much, because now I understand why, because I start early in the day, and by 2 o'clock, I'm like, I just need a little break. And so what I started to do is take my little dog. That's the time that we go walking, right? And then I come back, and thank you for explaining that, because it makes me feel a lot better. Because sometimes I'm like, is my body breaking down? Am I expecting too much?
But
We're
thank
all
you.
built that way. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. How has this change in the way we perceive our bodies and time so stuff? How is that affecting the professional environments today, right? Because it's, I come from corporate America, and even though I now have my own companies, I haven't really slowed down. If anything, I sped up more, right? But the expectation in corporate America, it's always, if I give you this now, I wanted it yesterday, right? Or how is this affecting the corporate environment, our relationships within the environment center, right? What's the impact that it's having?
Yeah. So if you extend the idea of time as money, well, money we see as scarce. So it means that the default is a time poverty, that we never have enough. And so we want people to, as a show of importance, to quickly do everything. How fast can things be done? It's like a God term, right? Fast, like speed is this idea that it's always would have to be good, that the faster, if time's money, then we don't want to waste time. So we take not wasting time as like doing things faster and faster. When and the challenge then is that organizations are, how are they run? People. All an organization is, like, a lot of companies don't have even a brick and mortar anymore. We know that organizations aren't buildings. Organizations are just people. They are people working. That's what an organization is. And so if you have this belief, this unexamined belief that time is money, and so that everything is urgent and has to be done very quickly, if you have that belief, what happens is the human element, which is a little different. We can talk about that in 1 second. But if you just think of just the clocks, then you are trying to minimize time spent communicating with others, because you think that the less we communicate, then the more time we have and the more efficient we'll be, and the better use we're making of time. And so everything is, I don't have time for this. I have only this many minutes for you. And people are rushing through their days. And actually, research across industries show that this idea of do more in less time actually leads to a lot more breakdowns. It actually leads to a lot more reworking, because of when you don't communicate, there's a lot of context that is missed. So I can talk about research I've done where teams were multidisciplinary teams. We looked across 71 teams in an organization, and they were doing very important work. These were social service agencies who were collaborating to share information around reported child abuse. So there were CPS workers and social workers and law enforcement and doctors and attorneys, and they're all working. Whenever a child was reported as abused, they had to quickly, so speed mattered, they had to, as quickly as possible, get the child like to safety, like figure out, like, is it taking some suspected perpetrator out of the home, taking the child out of the home, what is that, getting the child to safety, and then, prosecuting any perpetrators, and then helping the child recover emotionally. So through therapy and all sorts of things. So lots of moving parts, lots of different agencies working together, all of whom were overworked. So they all had far bigger caseloads than they really should have had if we frankly invested as much in people and children as we do in a number of other things. So that's the backdrop. And so we looked across who are the most effective teams. So you might think they were the teams who didn't meet because they wanted to save time. Well, we found that the teams who actually met more often through these case reviews, where they set in this kind of like they would just come together like monthly on average, sometimes a little less, sometimes more. They'd come together and they would just share information. Here's my update on my cases. Here's your update. And they would just sit and listen. The teams that did that most, and that could sometimes be 2-3 hours of their, like of the month or of the week, they didn't take as long, but say every month they would come together. They were faster and more effective at their casework, at protecting children, probably one of the most important things we could do on this planet. They were better at it because they had stopped, paused, taken time to listen, and to then build relationships with each other. So as a result, they almost could complete each other's sentences because they had stopped, taken the slow time, and could move faster because they understood that time is the event and the relationship, and we needed to share this. So that's where we go wrong, where we think, oh, if something's important, time is money, we should just speed past talking. We should speed past the relationships because that's slow. Yes, those things are slow, but that communicating slow is how we go fast.
That's amazing. And so, it's really interesting that you say that because we've actually developed a culture of speed. I almost feel like, you have the speed pass and you got the speed this and the speed that. It's almost like it's almost in our brain that we, as a culture, we celebrate speed, right? So when does this urgency become normalized and when does it become a culture?
Okay, that's a great question. So first of all, I just want to say it's okay to prioritize speed because there's times when speed is really important. So I don't want to demonize speed. However, what the problem is when we only think that speed is the only answer when everything has to be fast. So your question was, what happens when that's the culture? Was that your question?
Yeah, when it becomes a culture, like when it's the expected, is the norm, and and you can't fall outside of that norm, right?
Yeah. Yes. And that's so when we only think of everything as having to be fast, then we crowd out those opportunities that actually will help us to go fast. That's what I'm trying to say, that if we only value, everything, we're in this culture of speed and we think that's the only path forward in all moments at all times, if that's the only thing we're focused on is fast, then we will overlook the fact that sure, that is important sometimes, but what's important other times is to slow down and to learn, and that we can be more effective then. So we actually become less effective. If you've ever had a customer service call and you just keep getting sent from one place to another because no one's really listening. And
it's so aggravating.
It's so aggravating. And it's because they're not getting that sending you to the right place would actually save everyone's time. But instead they want to hear like, a 30-second, snippet of what you need and then send you to the next person. If there would be one, like in the past, there would be just one person before we had these various menus. They would listen to what you needed. Like a human would listen to what you needed. They could process what you needed. And if they couldn't help you, then they could send you to someone who could. But bureaucracies are really, really bad at true speed. Bureaucracies are good at keeping things moving, right? About being fast. They're good at that, but they aren't good at actual speed, because actual speed is stopping, understanding, and then acting.
Right. And it's interesting because you say that all this comes down to the relationships that we build, right? And as I think about it, it's because we are in this culture that we honor like how fast we go, because again, time is money, right? And we see what it does to us as humans. Like just talking about speed, and at the speed that even we're going, I can feel my nervous system accelerating. I can feel my blood begin to boil, right? Because we are going fast. And what does that do? In so many of these episodes, what keeps coming over, like what comes up over and over and over again, is the fact that we have become desensitized with our bodies, ourselves, our feelings, right? And how that ends up perpetrating in other areas in our lives, from our health, from our careers, from our even finances, our relationships. What are some of the things that you've seen? Like, talked about that, because I know you and I've talked about this in other episodes about autoimmune, right? Whereas our body begins to attack itself because we're like, hey, so talk to us a little bit about that. Like, how is this need for speed, right, affecting all of our other pillars in life and into living this beautiful, harmonious life?
Yes. So there's many ways. I'll talk about two. One is that if we are experiencing a threat. So scarcity is a threat, right? We see it, oh, I don't have enough of something. So we're seeing that as a potential threat. And if the scarcity we experience is a threat to time, and we don't see a way of making more time, and we see that this is just going to keep going, then we go into classic fight or flight. And so, right, because that's how our bodies throughout evolution, this is how we've evolved. Is in the past, there would be some physical threat, a wild animal, and we would have to decide with this wild animal, do we fight this animal? Like, we'd have to size up quickly. Can I kill this animal? Can I like protect myself? Or do I need to run? So fight or flight. Well, if the threat is no longer, for most of us, it's not wild animals. It's not a very common scenario, hopefully. But it is our sense of not having enough time. And the thing is, unlike this episodic moment with a wild animal, the not having enough time is not an episodic experience. It's a constant, continual experience. So from the time we wake up till the time we go to sleep, if we're just seeing a sense of time scarcity, our bodies constantly go through fight, flight throughout the day. And so the things that used to only happen during this physical threat in the past, where we would get the cortisol and the adrenaline, and that adrenaline would help us either run really fast. And by the way, part of how that adrenaline works is adrenaline, it stops your digestion so that you can use all of the blood in your body, not to digest food, but to physically either run or to fight. And our bodies don't know, they haven't caught up with the fact that there is not a wild animal every time we feel afraid, that we could just feel afraid that we don't have enough time because we see it as tied to money, and money is how we eat. So it's a serious, like our bodies see it as a very serious threat. And so our digestion gets really bad. Also the blood flow goes, like the more cognitive parts of our brain, that the more long-term thinking, those go away. And we have what's called this bandwidth tax. That's the other piece. So cognitively, when we experience scarcity, we don't think in the same way. We don't think in a long term. We don't think in a calm way. And so we're using just this kind of reptilian part of our brains. It's really, again, about fear. And so those are two physiological signs and processes that over time really degrade our health, because we're not meant to live with high levels of adrenaline and cortisol. And the other thing is we breathe differently in a threat. So we stop breathing deeply down here from our diaphragm, and it's all up here. You're not getting enough oxygen. Your blood isn't getting enough oxygen. So our whole bodies are harmed through this constant misunderstanding of scarcity. And it just immediately goes into that, and it hurts us, and we don't think clearly. And that's why we make mistakes and we don't sleep. The other piece of it is we say, well, if I don't have enough time, well, I could actually pull some time, like it's say 7 o'clock. I could actually pull some time from my nighttime routine, and I could skip dinner maybe, and then I could maybe not sleep or not sleep as much. So then we're pulling it from sleep. Well, in that 24-hour clock that I mentioned at first, that around 2 makes us stop to recover and go again. And so that's why we're really tired. There's also things that happen in the entire 24 hours in our sleep. There's a number of processes that only happen when we sleep, and including, it's like clearing plaque from our brains. So sleep scientists have now classified sleep deprivation as a carcinogen, because it's so important that we sleep, again, because a lot of important processes happen at 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. that our bodies don't do during our waking hours. And so sleep deprivation is a third, actually, way that it hurts our bodies, because it just pervades our entire being when we only think of time as a clock and as scarce.
It's incredible how I've always said our bodies are so smart, right? And all our bodies want to do is recover and protect, right? They want to protect, recover, right? And that's really what they want to be able to do. You mentioned a little bit earlier time poverty and time pressure. Talk to us a little bit more about that. What is time poverty, and how all this time pressure creates that?
Time poverty is the belief that there is not enough. And so then it perpetuates. Time poverty is the way that we then have a culture of time scarcity. So the two are really one and the same. We do not have a sense that there's enough. So like kind of poverty, and the people who their behavioral economists who have studied this bandwidth tax that happens from our cognitive load when we feel there's not enough, they actually study time and money. So there is a very specific way that they talk about the same kind of poverty, the same kind of thinking that leads to poverty in terms of really only being able to think in the short term. That same poverty that leads to fiscal poverty, that also leads to time poverty, because when we don't have enough, we then never invest in the smarter things. If you recall, many years ago, there was a really famous book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Oh, yes.
Remember that.
And then the 8th habit came out.
Yes. And one of the things that Covey talked about was sharpening the saw. That highly effective people, they stop and don't do anything. That's how you sharpen the saw through. If you're always using the saw, we know at some point you have to stop and sharpen it, or it slows down and it is less effective. So that's the same thing that's happening with time poverty. If you're feeling like you don't have a minute to stop and sharpen the saw and like get better systems, get a massage to rest, like do the things that allow you to get a full night's sleep. If you never stop to sharpen the saw, that is time poverty. And it is just as harmful in terms of never, ever allowing you to get to abundance, because you'll never make decisions that are abundant.
I think that was so beautifully said, because it's funny that you brought up this book, because I recently had that discussion with a team. And, for the first time this year, I actually, as busy as we are, I actually had everybody take a week off to literally for us to focus as a team. So it's a week off, but it's a week to focus on what are our goals for the year. So we literally opened up the year in saying, okay, today's dedicated to operations, today's dedicated to this. And they all had to literally say exactly like, everybody was in charge of one day. And then after that, we had to do something fun. So they were in charge for leading something fun. And it's incredible. I mean, I can't tell you the impact it had on the team. We're only into, what is it, like the first quarter, right? We're only into the first quarter. And to see the amount of focus in the team, because we broke down where do we want to be at the end of the year. And then we broke it down by quarter. Where do we want to be quarterly? And where do we want to be quarterly for every area, right? And it was so interesting, because as you mentioned this book, I kind of developed that concept from that in terms of leading the team. And then at the same time, when I'm dealing with things, and I have to deal with my mom now that has a lot of things coming at her. And whenever I deal with clients and they have a lot of things coming at them, I literally say to them, I said, here are the 5 pillars. It's health, it's career, it's finances, it's relationships, and it's personal growth. No matter what comes at you, throw it into one of those buckets and then prioritize it within that bucket.
Love that. That's brilliant. That is, yeah. I mean, that's the way forward.
Yeah, because I think that we're just in this need for speed, that things are coming at us at such a huge speed that we can either get into that whole motion, and then we have everything that affects us, kind of like what you said. It has this domino effect. So the question is for you, is this tempo that we expect of others and this tempo that we expect of ourselves, is it co-created or is it fixed?
It's co-created completely. And you give the example of you've traveled the world. This isn't the same everywhere. I have a student who told, I teach a class, 100, at least 100 students most semesters, called Time Matters. And so we go through this semester, and we can talk about it later, but through 12 dimensions of time. And at various stages, they share their experiences. And one who was doing a study abroad in Spain, she once was walking to class, eating like a power bar. It's like a protein bar, right?
Yes.
And she said people stopped her to see, did she need help? They thought she was unhoused because they had not seen people walking and eating. Like, why wouldn't you stop to sit down for breakfast or lunch? Like, the idea that you would be multitasking to the extent that you're eating and walking to class, and she was in a hurry. They just couldn't understand. They couldn't place her in a particular, because they're like, what's happening?
They couldn't put it in the box.
And the French are known for their lunches. and really taking lunch seriously. And Italians are known, there's actual cities in Italy that are designated slow cities, part of this worldwide slow movement, where you can go and things aren't open all day long. It's okay. You'll survive. There's also like no internet. There's people just, live their lives in conversation with others. They take breaks when they need to take breaks, and
Mhm.
and people actually pay a premium to do that, to remember the pace and rhythm of our bodies, because it's all here. Like if you listen to your body, you being sleepy around too. It's because your body's doing a process that is recovering. It needs this break, this brief nap in the middle of the day to go forward. And in fact, sleep scientists have also talked about how car accidents are more common during that window. It's like between 2 and 4.
Wow.
People are driving sleepy. Yeah.
Wow. Well, you have I so much information on time that I don't think we've ever looked at it that way. I know you have a book coming up as well. And congratulations on that. And I look forward actually to having you back and talking about this 12 dimensions. We're going to talk all about this 12 dimensions when you're back. I'm not even asking. I'm just saying when you're back.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Yes, I love it. I love this conversation. I love your 5 pillars. You get it. Like you said in the intro, instinctively, you get it. You got it.
Oh, well, I'm still learning. Every day I'm learning. And
We
so
all
for
are.
the listeners, I did promise biohacks in every single episode. So, for the listeners, because, we'll go back to the whole thing. We want to take action today, but we want the results yesterday, right? So for the listeners out there, can you share some biohacks of how they can even become aware of it, or what are some of the things that they can do to help them improve this cultural speed that we live in? And not just the culture of speed, but the expectations more than anything else. Give us biohacks. Bring it home. Come on, bring it home.
Okay, so I'll name a few things that I actually assign to my students in the Time Matters class. The first one is an assignment on scheduling. So you have to do one of 3 things. So this is a really good, you have to either cancel something on your schedule, just cancel it. Like you could reschedule it, but it's off your schedule. And you would be shocked at the relief that people have of just saying, I did not need this. I did not need to do this. I did not need to be here. It might have been going out with friends. And they're like, I just needed a night in to sleep,
Yes.
so that's one option. The other is to resist scheduling. If someone wants to schedule with you and you're already overscheduled, but there's nothing you can cancel, then just when the next thing comes, just say, not now, not now. Like it might be next month, but not now. And the third option, if that's not an issue for you and you feel like there's something else, is to schedule for yourself something that you need to do, that you have been putting off because you've been putting everything else on your to-do list. Some of us have less scheduled lives, but we have a long to-do list. So this helps those people, because we do see scheduling as so sacred that if they put it on their calendar as an appointment with themselves, they're more likely to do it. So that is one simple biohack. No matter what your time looks like, everyone can do one of those 3 things.
I love it. I love it. And I think that's such a beautiful way to end this conversation. I look forward to having you back. You obviously understand at the core what time is and chronemics, if I said it correctly.
Um,
And look forward to having you back. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been incredible to have this conversation with you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I look forward to being back.
I'll see you later. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
As we come to the end of this conversation, I keep thinking about how rarely we pause to question our pace. Time can feel so fixed, so external, so urgent. We move through our days responding, adjusting, keeping up. rarely noticing the rhythm we're participating in. And yet, what Dawna reminds us is that time is not just something happening to us, it's something we're constantly shaping in our interactions, through how quickly we respond, through whether we interrupt or allow space, through the assumptions we carry about urgency. Over time, those small patterns become the tempo of our lives. When speed becomes normal, we stop feeling it. When busyness becomes expected, it feels inevitable. But pace is not neutral. It's negotiated, it's reinforced, it's shared. And that means it can also be reconsidered. Maybe the invitation today is simply to notice. Notice how quickly you reply. Notice how much space you allow in a conversation. Notice when urgency rises and whether it's truly required. There's something powerful about becoming aware of the rhythm you're helping create. So, I encourage you to bring awareness to your pace. And remember, the rhythm of your life is not accidental. Until next time, this is Health and Wealth.